Listen, last week I read, I think it was a Facebook posting of my next guest, who happens to be a farmer from Canterbury. And when I read that Facebook posting, which was quite voluminous, and we'll get to that in just a second, I was struck by the fact that the evidence, or sorry, the experience of my farmer friend on Facebook, Dave Clark from Canterbury, would be shared, I would suspect, by many of farmers throughout this country or folk who are doing business as regards their interactions with councils, regional, district and city, and in their application for consents, which seems to be a rort, R-O-R-T, now of the most significant dimension, and is probably right up there with Nigerian love bombers, and I don't know, Jen Taylor's professing that they're in it for the country, its best interests, as one of the worst excuses of the 21st century in this country when it comes to we're really trying to help you, but we're pissing you off and charging you every moment of the day. Now, so I introduce the story for you next of Dave Clark, and Dave joins us now. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show, mate.
Michael, good morning. Speaking with you today on such a lovely day.
It is, good. Mate, tell me a little bit about yourself. You are a farmer. What do you farm and where do you live?
Yeah, so we're in just down below Mount Somers. We're irrigated arable farmers. So that means that we grow wheat, barley, ryegrass, white clover, carrot seed, hybrid radish seed, phacelia, bok choy, pack canola, peas, and we currently farm some breeding, and we buy in lamb and we finish lambs and sell them in the springtime. So we're what's called a mixed farm, fully irrigated Canterbury. My family and I moved to Canterbury in 1994 Island. This is what we proudly mid-Canterbury arable farmers.
Listen, you're breaking up for us, Dave, which we suspected that might happen. So Josh is just going to get you on the phone, okay, so that we can get this, because, okay, you've now just met Dave. He's an arable farmer, farms a little, I think he does a little bit of livestock, but he's an arable farmer on the Canterbury Plains, all right? So that's what we know about him thus far. And when Josh gets him back on the phone, we will be that. Just a couple of emails or texts at the moment. Nash wasn't offensive. The Simplicity CEO was grossly offensive. Dave, we've got you back. I hope you're right, mate.
Michael, sorry about that technology for you, eh?
No, well, yeah, that's just the way it works. That's all right, mate. We've got you now. Okay, so you're an arable farmer. You're on the Canterbury Plains. You've been doing it for a while. What are you, second or third generation, did you say?
Oh, look, we're actually about fifth if we go right back through our iterations. But originally farmed in the North Island through the 1800s, 1900s in the North Island. So, yeah, proudly here in Canterbury. We're not dairy farmers. Dairy farming's great, but we're arable farmers, grow a whole bunch of grain and seed and vegetable seed crops, and run some breeding ewes and fatten some lambs.
Okay, so that's fine. And then take me to the next bit. So you irrigate your land. So at some stage you get land from a river or stream, I suspect, and for that you need a consent from your local regional council. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we much like you have to water your garden to get a decent crop of vegetables, we have to water our land to get a decent crop of vegetable seed. So we put some irrigation on here starting in 1998. That over time through to 2010 fully irrigated the farm. We got consents to draw water from wells. Now those consents are still operating. They operate till 2038. But in the Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan, it was then decided, for its merits, that we would have to get a consent to farm the farm. So we have to have a land use consent. Now, we applied for a land use consent in 2016-17, one of the first in Canterbury to get a land use consent. I had some roles within Federated Farmers, so felt it was best to be leading from the front, get a consent, comply with the plan, off we went. Those consents to farm the land, quite separate to the irrigation consent, those consents to farm the land have now expired and have to be renewed. Thus starts the nightmare.
Right. So you need a consent to farm the land. Why? Are you drawing water as well?
Yeah, but that's actually a completely separate issue. So
there's nothing to do with the consent that you need for farming the land itself.
No, the consent we're trying to renew is the consent to farm the land. The irrigation consent is continuing to run.
No, I've got that, and it's the aquifer that looks after that and things like that. It's just that I didn't know that you needed a consent in Canterbury to farm at all, unless you were using water.
No, so most of us do. So one of the triggers is if the farm's irrigated. Another trigger is if you're growing winter feed. So we're here at higher altitude in Canterbury. Grass doesn't grow through the winter, so we have to grow winter feeds so that we can store that feed, grow that feed, and store it through the autumn, and then feed it off through the cold months of the winter. Much like you put food away in the freezer and store it till another day. That's effectively what we do with winter feed. But our area of winter feed triggers a need for a resource consent to allow us to do that.
Okay, so off we go. Your consent's expired. You go into ECAN, Canterbury Regional Council. We've got a land and water plan now, which presumably has come in the last 3 or 4 years. And you say, can I have a consent to do this again, please? And what happens next?
So we manage consultants to do that, so we weren't doing it personally. So the process for that is you have to use a model called Overseer, which is a theoretical computer model that estimates the amount of nitrogen might be being lost out of the farming system into groundwater. Now, that's a program that has been fraught with inaccuracies and political backwards and forwards. Simon Upton, PCE for the environment, wrote a report and raised a lot of concerns about Overseer. So there's difficulties with Overseer, particularly in an arable farming system. But we thought, given that effectively it was a continuation of our existing farm system, we weren't making any great changes, we weren't converting to dairying, we weren't doing anything radical, it was a continuation. And given that from our farm we can see 5 new dairy farms that have been consented and will be milking cows next year, we would have thought if there was room within the nutrient allocation zones for new dairy farms, then a status quo farm like ours should be an easy rollover. Not so. We have been buried in requests for detail from the Regional Council. So the farm, unfortunately, sits across 2 nutrient allocation zones that the council have drawn into their plans. 1/3 of the farms in the Ashburton River Zone. That requires us to use a thing called the farm portal to assume what our impact of our nutrient losses are. The farm portal doesn't work for arable farming, so then you have to apply to use what's called the alternative pathway. The other 2/3 of the farm are in the lower Hind zone. It's all one land title, it's all one farm. But the other 2/3 is in the lower Hind zone. That's covered by another set of rules that require us to use Overseer and make a series of staged reductions over time. All that's fine, but that makes it incredibly complicated then to run one farm when you've got 2 completely different sets of rules to run by, 2 different modelling techniques or systems that have to be used. It then has to be reported separately, but then to satisfy the request for further information that the Regional Council have come up with, my advisors tell me we would then have to remodel the farm into a 4-year and a 12-year theoretical farm rotation using good management practice, assumed fertiliser applications to get an assumed continuance of the farm program and then assess whether the existing farming year complied with all of that. An enormous amount of work on top of what's already been an enormous amount of work.
Dave, just listening to this, I'm losing the will to live. So if I'm losing the will to live, what's it like being in the middle of having to satisfy what seems to be an excessive bureaucracy? And I imagine, just can I say also when I talk about excessive bureaucracy, a bureaucracy that's expensive. What are they charging an hour to ask these questions and to process your consent?